I'm now joined by toxicologist Dr Gerhard Verdoorn. Dr Gerhard, I appreciate your time this afternoon. Now, the issue around food poisoning is on the increase. What are the primary toxins responsible for the spike in food poisoning cases, and why are children particularly vulnerable?
Well, maybe I should start off with saying I told you so. I've been warning about this for years now, that we see what we call street pesticides in the hands of foreign nationals in spaza shops on the streets. Like last week, I was out in Uitenhage and I found foreign nationals and local people selling these street pesticides. And the ones that we refer to are mostly aldicarb in Gauteng, and in the Western Cape we also find turbofos. And then a newcomer to the market is what we call diclofos. That is a liquid, unlike the other two, which are granular, and sometimes even methylmidofos and diazonon. Now, what happens is that these chemicals are unlabeled, they are unregistered, they are not legal pesticides. They're being sold in amongst the foodstuff in spaza shops or by the street vendors. And in many cases, the foodstuffs that the children buy from these spaza shops are contaminated with these pesticides, because there is not food security there. There's no separation between the foodstuffs and between the pesticides. And you can imagine if that little bag of aldicarb breaks open, spills over the chippies or the cookies or the sweeties that the kiddies buy, they are going to be contaminated, and the children will consume poisoned food without even knowing the food they eat contains the poison. It is also likely, when we see the massive surge in the so-called fumigants, which are sold illegally by South Africans and by foreign nationals, that people in these spaza shops use them to sort of fumigate or spray their spaza shops against cockroaches, because I know for a fact there's a pandemic outbreak of cockroaches, and these chemicals go and sit on the foodstuffs. Now, the question is, why the children? The children don't have money to go and buy the properly packed pack of biscuits or sweeties or candy or crunchy chips for that matter. So these vendors, informal vendors, they unpack the foodstuffs, they put them into bowls, or they put them into a plastic bag or a little bucket, and then the children buy themselves a handful of biscuits or a couple of sweeties or a couple of crunchies, and those are the ones that normally carry the poisons. When children eat them, it has dire consequences. And I'm horrified to learn over the last couple of months that we got more than 50 deaths per month. So the question is, when does it stop? It will only stop if the government takes serious action. I've been pleading for this for years now. And unfortunately, we now sit at a pandemic situation where not only children, but also adults fall ill. And in many cases, they simply die off before they get to medical care. And if they do get to medical care, they are so badly poisoned by these chemicals, which are exceptionally toxic, that even the doctors and the medical nurses in the hospitals can't resuscitate them because their central nervous system have collapsed. So I see it as a real onslaught. And what we heard this afternoon on the channel, it's only about death, death, death. And this is, to me, one of the worst forms, because it's not supposed to happen. It's not supposed to happen if we work with legally registered pesticides. We do get poison, but seldom, if ever. With the street pesticides, every single week I get the reports, and the reports are becoming more heinous every single time. It's not only 2 or 3 children, it's now 40, 50 children that either become very seriously ill and go to hospital, or a bundle of them just dying off after they ate the food. So from my perspective, as a chemist and toxicologist, I have severe sympathy with our people, but I also call the government to start lifting up and doing something about it, because it's a serious situation for our nation. It paints us with a very dark picture.
Now, a couple of questions that come from your comments there, Dr. Gerhard. Now, one of those issues seems to be that there's a focus on, call it contaminated foods or foodstuffs that have expired, and we've seen various government officials going into these spaza shops and other little outlets and pulling out the expired foods. But what also seems to be apparent is the fact that these spaza shops, which are normally might be a 2-by-1 space, so very, very small. And in those shops, these individuals are selling highly toxic chemicals and are also selling foodstuffs. What are the regulations around a mix of highly toxic chemicals or substances and foodstuffs?
Well, I can tell you for a start, these chemicals that you see featuring in the potential poisoning of the children, I've heard the first reports, and all my suspicions are 100% on the dot after from what they found in the post-mortem analysis. These chemicals are all regulated not only by Act number 36 of 1947, which is under the Department of Agriculture, but they're also regulated under Act number 15 of 1973, which is the Department of Health. And they have to be registered. If they're not registered, you cannot sell them. If they're not in the appropriate containers with a label that was approved by the registrar, you're not allowed to sell them. If they're in an unlabeled package, you're not allowed to own them. And on top of that, if you want to sell them, you need to be licensed with what we call a Group 1B license by the Department of Health. And I can guarantee you that these informal vendors and all of the foreign nationals do not have those licenses. So they don't know what they're dealing with. They're selling the stuff unlawfully. The children buy the stuff. The parents often buy it and take it home because it's sold in many cases as a rat muti or a rodenticide, which is not the right term because it's not a rodenticide. It's an illegal pesticide. Or they sell it in a small little spray bottle as a cockroach fumigant, which is not, because at that stage it becomes an illegal foreign chemical. So this is the issue. So those people are not even allowed to have those things in their possession. And I heard recently from my one colleague who worked for the department that they went out and the police did not even arrest the people who were in possession of a totally banned pesticide substance. Now my question is, why not? This continues. I've been out with departments of health and agriculture and SPCA and Metro Police in my own area. And
but is it the responsibility of the police? Is it the responsibility of the police to be apprehending, not City Health Department?
Well, City Health can go and investigate. The same as the Agriculture Department, the same as the Department of Health. So City Health and Department of Agriculture can go and inspection. But the power of arrest lies with the South African Police Service, because the inspectors from the Department of Health and the inspectors from the Department of Agriculture do not have the mandate or the powers of arrest. And when they take the police along with them, we expect the South African police to arrest the people who are in unlawful possession of a banned or a foreign chemical like that. And I must tell you that the Department of Agriculture and Department of Health inspectors do the level best, but they're thin on the ground. And we have to rely then on the police to make the arrest, to take those people into custody, to make sure they open a docket. And if they undocumented foreign nationals, I expect the government to expel them, because I very often find in my area that these foreign nationals are undocumented. They don't even carry a passport with them. My question is, how do they get into the country? On top of that, they bring LD-carp into the country, which we know 1/10 of a teaspoon can kill an adult man like myself who weighs 81 kilograms. So this is our problem. Our inspectors do their best. We need to get the police to up their performance and to arrest the people and to put them behind bars and to impose the maximum penalties upon them. And if a foreign national that sells stuff illegally to our people, I would like to see them leave our country, because our own South African poor people are at the risk of being killed by this action.
Now, how effective is current medical treatment for toxin ingestion in children, and what improvements are needed in emergency responses? A few weeks ago, I spoke to one or two individuals to ask about these issues. In fact, it was around about the time that the 5 little children lost their lives in Soweto. And it seems that there is a lack of preparedness.
Well, you must understand why, because these chemicals, like I said to you, they're all extremely toxic. And even if you're a well-qualified medical doctor or a nurse or a paramedic, and believe me, our South African medical fraternity are all well-trained, they're well-qualified, they know how to treat the patient. But the chemicals are so toxic, by the time the patient, whether adult or youth, gets to the doctor or the nurse, it is virtually too late. If you don't get that person in your hands as a medical professional within 15 minutes and start administering the atropine sulfate and the activated charcoal, your chance of getting the patient through the worst is very limited. And very often there aren't ambulance service, or the people think they just got mild food poisoning. Now, typical food poisoning is not like that. People seldom, if ever, die from food poisoning. The problem lies in the fact that even if our doctors and nurses are well qualified and they have the antidotes available at the clinic or the hospital or the emergency practice, by the time the patient gets there, that patient is on death's door. And it is seldom, if ever, effective to treat them at that stage with the atropine sulfate, because the central nervous system has fallen apart. So if you're lucky enough as a medical doctor or a nurse to get your patient within 50 minutes and the patient had vomited and you can then atropinize the patient with the antidote, and you can hydrate the person. Your chance of resuscitating the person and getting the person to full recover is very, very good. And again, I applaud our medical fraternity and our inspectors to do the right thing, but it is very often too late by the time they get into a hospital to treat them, because the central nervous system collapsed away.
Now, just your thoughts before, as we wrap up this conversation, Dr. Gerhard, and that question is, how do we educate the children? Or is it the parents? Obviously, I don't assume that many of these spaza shops are going to stop selling these products or stocking these chemicals in the next few months. We've been tracking stories similar to these for several months now. But we need to educate parents. We need to educate the children. What does that process look like for you?
To me, I think it lies in the hands of the Department of Health. It also lies in the hands of the Department of Education, but also, for that matter, in the hands of people like myself who work with the public and advise the public. Is, first of all, we need to put together a collage of what these chemicals look like, because they all have a particular look and feel. So show them the black granules or the gray granules or the brown granules, the spray bottle, or whatever the people sell them, and tell them these things are the ones causing your death. Do not buy any food stuff close to where you see them, and do not buy them at all and take them home, because they are like an unlicensed rifle or a firearm. They are going to kill you. And then advise our people, even though you don't have enough money, stay away from a place where people sell foodstuff which are open, unwrapped, and not in the original packaging. And if you do buy any foodstuff as a child or an adult or a youth, and you that packet or the parcel of that food is compromised, you must be very suspicious, because we found in some of the cases that happened about a year or two ago, that some of the chemicals were deliberately put into noodles, for that matter. And to this day, we don't know why it happened. So we have to educate people by going visual, and especially channels like your own and radio channels in the local languages for people, to educate people, tell them, when you see something like a little black granule in a small parcel, or brown granule in a small parcel, or a little spray bottle with a pale yellowish liquid, stay away. That is going to kill you. And don't buy food which is not properly wrapped. It is better to save your money and eventually to go to the shop and buy yourself a proper pack of biscuits, which is properly wrapped from a proper food store, because at least you know then that food is edible, that food is safe. But if you go to a spaza shop and you buy unpacked food which is not properly wrapped, you take your life into your own hands. And unfortunately, it kills people. I hate the idea of seeing poor South Africans expiring because of this. So I think if we all take hands and we all talk about this every day, and we get the Education Department and Department of Health to go out on a large scale, and the health inspectors, I work with Agriculture Department anyway on this, and we educate everybody. At least if we create the awareness, people will understand, because our people are not informed. Our people are not well educated about this. And also, we need to get people to understand that many of the spaza shops are not safe, because the food there is either expired, which is an issue because it can cause normal food poisoning. But the food, from my perspective, is very often poisoned because of the fact that they harbor illegal chemicals or illegal pesticides in their food stores. They contaminate the food, and see what happens. We cannot go on by losing 50 children a week to pesticide poison. It is not acceptable.
It definitely isn't. Toxicologist Dr Gerhard Verdoorn, I appreciate your time. Thank you so much for speaking to us. And he was feeding into that issue where hundreds have been poisoned via contaminated food or contaminated food.